Welcome back, everybody, to the Ryan's Vedic Astrology YouTube channel. I'm here with Karen White. We've been doing a series of videos on how the planets affect our relationships in our birth chart, and also looking into the D9 and occasionally going into the D7. Karen and I have done a lot of work together, podcasts. We've done a class on the AtmaKaraka and the soul planet in relationships, which is also a downloadable course on both our sites. Karen's website is divinetimeastrology.com, and she does a pretty good job with relationship astrology, which is why we're having this conversation. And today we're going to be talking about Venus in particular. So welcome, Karen. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Ryan. I've been really enjoying this. This is really fun.
Yeah. And is that Venus I see behind you?
That is done by Shristi. Shristi is Ernst Wilhelm's wife. Mm-hmm. She's a fabulous artist. And what she did was she painted all of the planets as they're depicted. I believe it's in the Parashara Sutras, the description of what it should look like if you wanted to create a deity. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I bought it. I bought that one and Jupiter.
Excellent. Yeah. I know that she also offers them on pillows too.
Oh, does she?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
You can get them printed on pillows. I haven't got one of those yet, but I thought about getting, K2 on my pillow.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so today we're going to be talking about Venus, and the first thing we need to consider is when we're looking at a person's astrological chart, what does Venus represent? So, Karen, when you're looking at a person's astrological chart and you're trying to get a sense of how Venus is influenced, what are the main qualities, the indications of Venus? How do you consider Venus chart?
Well, in a woman's chart, I look to see where it is in relationship to the ascendant and the sign that it's in, of course, any planets that are with it or aspecting it. Okay. And certain things really stand out. So if a woman has Venus in the fourth house from the ascendant, or even the fourth house from the ascendant, then I know she knows how to relax. She knows how to enjoy herself. She knows how to comfort herself in healthy ways, meaning, that she's not going to necessarily indulge in things that aren't good for her. And that her inner emotional life, she has emotional strength. Mm-hmm. She has the ability to find meaning in her painful experiences. Mm-hmm. And she enjoys beauty, and she'll make an effort to have it around her. Right. But if Venus is, like, say, with Rahu, then I know there's a good chance that she may have had to struggle with addictions at some point in her life. And what I'd like to say about that is that if you do have Venus either with Saturn or with Rahu or even with Ketu, and you have problems with addiction, one of the best ways to learn how to use your Venus properly is to get treatment and help for that addiction. Because the only way that you can truly get rid of it is by learning how to do Venus things, which is to comfort yourself and soothe yourself in healthy ways, to see meaning in your painful experiences and beauty in everything around you, and to be devoted to something. It also tells me like what they're likely to be devoted to, what area of life will bring them fulfillment.
By the house that it's in?
The house that it's in, and the planets aspecting it, the houses that it rules. Of course, I look at the Navamsa too, the ninth divisional chart, because Venus is a very important planet in that chart, to see if Venus is strong enough to produce marriage for them, love, relationship.
Right.
The Sapsamsha too, the seventh divisional.
And it's important, when you're mentioning the idea of the addictions, that many people, when they think of addictions, they go immediately to like food addictions or to drugs or things of this nature. But we have to be very aware that there are all kinds of addictions, and that the addiction of trying to find Mr. Right could be equally as strong with Venus and Rahu. That's what I'm really focusing on.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah. So, I just like to keep clear on that, because I notice a lot of people with Venus Rahu that they have this sort of fantasy about what relationship is supposed to be like, and they can't quite figure it out. So like you say, get treatment for whatever the addiction is. But one thing that I've found with Rahu and any planet is that they need to realize they don't really have a good sense of what is a healthy relationship. And so they might need to read books on it or talk to someone who has a healthy relationship.
Right.
And the big problem is they're not really going to like the fact, they're not going to like what people tell them about what a healthy relationship is, because it's not going to feed into the fairy tale.
Yeah. Make a study of relationship.
Right.
And that's a really good thing to do with Venus, because Venus is all about relationship. The other thing I've noticed too with Venus Rahu is that they tend to have short, intense relationships because they're fascinated by something in that other person. It's almost like a hypnotic thing. And so because of that, what they'll do is they'll pursue the person, get into a relationship with the person, and then one day realize, oh, it was just that one thing I liked about this guy. He's not anything like I imagined him to be. And then the relationship's over, just like that. Either that, or they can conduct entire relationships in their head. It's just all, like you were saying, fantasy.
Well, yeah. And one thing that just came to mind when you mentioned that, for you men who like women, finding a woman with Rahu Venus, the thing about that might be, you need to be aware of, is that whenever we get Rahu with another planet, that it can sometimes cause a person to overcompensate with that planet. So a woman with Rahu Venus might be trying to figure out her feminine side, how her Venus is really supposed to work in a healthy fashion. And if she hasn't figured that out yet, she can be overly sexual or overly loving or overly flattering or overly everything you think Venus should be. And a lot of times that can pull a person in. And if you're not watching for that, again, even the male in the relationship can get let down in that regard. So for Rahu and Venus, I think that's a really interesting to watch for both women who have it, but also for men interested in women. If they find a woman who has that, they need to be very cautious of that, not fall into the hypnotic Venus that
right
do there.
There's also a strong emphasis on outer beauty.
Right.
So there's like a lot of emphasis on makeup and hair and clothing, and it can be like real glamorous looking. It can be very beautiful, but it's very glamorous. But it's part of the women's, because whenever a planet's with Rahu, that planet is under construction. It's being developed this lifetime. So first they try on all the external, what am I looking for? The external symbols of femininity until later on. And then for men, when they have that, they tend to be very attracted to women from other cultures, other than the culture that they were raised in themselves.
Right.
So when you see men who are like American, typical white male, married to like a Japanese woman or a woman from a totally different culture, you can know he has Rahu, either with Venus, aspecting Venus in the 7th house or something like that. That's, and I've had have men like that, clients. Those are the only kind of women that I've ever been attracted to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in general, when you're thinking about Venus, since it does represent relationships and romance and that quality of a person's life, what kind of things do you look for to see, is a person going to be able to feel comfort within a relationship, or are they always going to feel a sense of lack? What kind of combinations do you?
Well, if Venus is with Saturn, then I know love will come later in life, because Saturn is a delaying factor. Also that there's pain there. There's some need for emotional healing, especially around relationship. And there is, because Saturn starves any planet that he's with, so it could bring about addiction, simply because they're trying to self-medicate, find a way to soften the hard edges of life.
Right.
But later on, as you get older, it gets better. It just means you're very, very realistic about relationships and you appreciate what you have more. Of course, that works better if Saturn's in an easier aspect to Venus, but when it's with Venus, then that's really rough.
Right.
At least for like the first half of life. But then the other thing that when I see Mars with Venus, especially when it's with it, then I know that they're going to have to work through understanding what abuse is and what isn't abuse. And they tend to be very passionate, which is, a positive thing. It can be if it's channeled correctly. And, the person that you're with also has the same level of passion.
Right.
Otherwise, you just be perpetually frustrated.
Yeah.
So that's what it means. It's a yoga for frustration in married life. Mm-hmm. And why? You want to talk about why?
No, I want to hear why you want to talk about why.
Well, okay, it's because Mars. Mars is because of Mars. He's idealistic. Right. He wants to fix things. He wants to continually improve things. And he's impatient. He's dry. He doesn't need anything. Mm-hmm. Right? So when you have that together, well, you can be a challenging person to be in a relationship with, mm-hmm. unless you know the proper use of your Mars.
Right.
If you're a woman, that Mars is supposed to help you first, children under the age of 5, and sick or disabled people. Mm. Everybody else, you use that masculine side to help to understand yourself first, take care of yourself first, and then other people second. Mm-hmm. And if you're a man, I think it's a lot harder for men to learn this because, well, they're men. They want to cultivate.
We don't know much of anything really. It's hard for us to know. Is she mad? Is she not mad? Should I have said that? Should I have not said that? Is this the best time to keep my mouth shut?
My daughter likes to say, she said, men are stupid and women are crazy.
Yeah, it's probably
the first person. You tell it like it is.
Well, the funny thing I always find is when, sometimes in relationships, you think to yourself, all right, I know I shouldn't say anything right now because I'm probably going to say the wrong thing.
Right.
But then when you don't say anything, then, they're wondering, well, why aren't you saying anything at all? So it's like,
win.
You can't win. You can't win. So.
It's very hard to win, and I'll be the first to admit that. It's true. Women are hard to understand from a man's point of view, and honestly, ourselves, we don't really truly understand ourselves. I mean, that's not why we do things like meditate and go into, develop a spiritual life and all those things so that we can understand ourselves. Isn't that why we go to astrologers? Isn't that why we study it? Because we're mysterious. We really are mysterious beings. But anyway, so
I agree.
When I see a man have this in his chart, I know that he's gone through all kinds of experiences.
Right.
But he tends to like these fierce women. Mm-hmm. And I have a client who showed me a picture of his ideal woman. Mm-hmm. And she had like tattoos on her face and rings in her nose. And she was really beautiful, but she looked like a warrior goddess. Mm-hmm. And it made me laugh because that's what he wants.
Right. Yeah.
Or he thinks he does.
You're right. Exactly. Yeah. I remember, what was it? There was some course that Ernst Wilhelm did that he was talking about relationships, and he said something like, every guy wants, what did he say? A super hot, wild woman until he gets one. And then he doesn't. But anyway, with that Mars and Venus, one thing I've seen is that in general, Mars and Venus, it does give a person, like you mentioned, a lot of passion, a lot of drive. So they can be a real fireball. Mm-hmm. And, as we talked about in other videos, like if you are in a relationship with someone who is also that way, then you can understand each other more. So when it comes to Mars and Venus, I think these are good for certain things because they give a lot of passion. They get a lot of drive. They can also give a lot of self-satisfaction. Mm. But whenever you get that in one person's chart, and not in another person's chart when it comes to relationships, then we get this really passionate, driven person. And they're wondering why the other individual can't take what they want or comfort themselves or, get fired up and enjoy the conflict in life. So I think it's important to remember with Mars and Venus that there are very good things about that combination. But in order to understand it, oftentimes we have to be with someone who also has it.
Otherwise, we'll feel impatient and irritated with that person. Mm-hmm. And in the Vedic compatibility technique, those reports that Ernst put together,
right,
that you can get on either one of our websites, by the way, one of the main things that's measured is the assertive pressure.
Right.
So, if one person is way more assertive than the other, that's going to be a problem. Unless there are times when it's okay, like when the energy is reversed between the men and the women. Mm-hmm. And the woman is really being thrown into the masculine energy and the man's being thrown into the feminine. If his assertive pressure is a lot higher than hers, that can help a lot.
Right.
Otherwise, she'll end up feeling very annoyed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had a friend of mine tell me, though, and she has that situation in her relationship, and she had a dream. She had a dream where she turned into like this, almost like a tiger or a lion, and she just took a big old hunk out of his arm. She was like, and because of the frustration that she had been experiencing on a daily basis.
Right.
So anyway, you have epic fights.
Yeah. Right. And again, if you've got both Mars and Venus, you might enjoy it, but yeah. When we're thinking about Venus in relationships and marriage, I think the main key is the capacity to find comfort in the marriage, to find a sense of purpose within the marriage. And one thing I've seen in people's charts is that when we get Venus in a better dignity, Venus in a trine, or even, it can be in the ascendant or in the 10th as well, generally good positions for Venus, the person tends to have a strong sense of purpose about their marriage, meaning they see the reason they're in it. And they also have a tendency to feel that it's a comfortable, soothing thing. And that's why they say, there's a study out there that says people, I think it's actually men who are married tend to live longer when they're married.
Yeah.
Right? But if I recall correctly, it doesn't go the other way. Women don't actually live longer when they're married.
It depends. I would say it's a big depends. If they're in a relationship where the compatibility is good, and the man is more the masculine, and then she's more the feminine, then she can get like a feeling of deep relaxation in that relationship because she doesn't have to worry about a lot of things.
Right.
In the feminine energy person, she just has to make sure that she looks good, smells good, sounds good, feels good, and provides a sensual arena.
Right.
For the man to come home and to relax and let down his hair and be in his heart. That's really what men want from women, from the feminine. The masculine wants that from the feminine and needs it.
Right.
So it depends. But if she's one of these women who is always overdoing, like say she's got a strong Mars or Sun or something like that in the wrong place, or the energy's reversed.
Right.
She overdoes all the time. She's constantly working and doing. She gets worn out.
Well, one thing I've seen to follow up, that's a good point. One thing I've seen to follow up on that is that these studies that say that men live longer if they're married, and don't take this the wrong way, but the rest of the study says that women live longer if they have girlfriends.
Yeah, this is true because we take care of each other.
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. So it makes sense that maybe two women being married would live longer.
Maybe. I don't know. I guess
I don't know if they've done study on that.
People are so individual.
Right.
But then they have other problems they have to deal with.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can't, it's like saying if you have a cat, it's going to live longer if it's an indoor cat. Well, yeah, on average, but not always,
This is true.
But anyway, so when you think about Venus, and say in bad dignity, or Venus in like the 6th house or the 12th house, how does that, when you see that, how does that typically affect a person's capacity for marriage and relationships? Venus in bad dignity or Venus in difficult house?
Yeah, it's a delaying factor.
Mm-hmm.
And like Venus in the 6th house is a person who tries to make friends out of their enemies. Mm. And sometimes they succeed, but most of the time they just get beaten up.
Mm.
Because their enemies think, oh, great, an easy target.
Right.
And or they just have a harder time accessing their ability to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And or it could indicate a healer, somebody who is involved in the healing arts.
Caring and nurturing others.
Caring and nurturing others, and that's eventually they may learn how to do it for themselves too.
Right.
But usually they're the caretaker, though. The people that you go to for help of some kind of healing thing, and you can tell by looking at them that they don't do it for themselves.
Right.
And it's something that they have to learn how to do. And if Venus is in the 8th house, I mean, it's good and bad. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
In the 8th house, it means you can have a really nice bond with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Means you could inherit things from your partner. But it's a delaying factor.
Right.
You could have a love and a devotion for the occult sciences, like astrology.
Right, because it's in the 8th house, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so what just to clarify for those who are listening, what Karen's getting at, we mentioned earlier, is that whatever house Venus is in will tell a person what are they really going to be devoted to.
Yeah.
3rd house, hobbies and interests. 8th house, the occult and their longevity. 10th house, their career.
Other people's money.
Other people's money, yeah. 8th house, other people's money. And when we think about Venus in the Navamsa, we're aware that the Navamsa often deals with the capacity to generate a healthy marriage. And, one of the things I've noticed about Venus in the Navamsa is that when it's in bad dignity or it's being starved by its enemies, that maybe the person doesn't have the capacity, or the ability to be as diplomatic as might be necessary. Right. Have you found that to be true too?
Yeah, definitely. Or they feel like they always feel like there's something missing in their relationship.
Right.
Because Venus produces love.
Mm-hmm.
And, it can be offset if there's a nice Jupiter, because you'll still have happiness. Maybe your relationship would be devoted to something outside of both of you.
Right.
And that'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then with some people, I'll see that some of the other planets aren't doing so well, but Venus is great. So if they can manage to get married, they'll have love.
Right.
Like real satisfying, fulfilling love. Or if it's in the Sapsamsha, the 7th divisional chart, sometimes Venus is great there and not good at all in the Navamsa.
Right.
And if they really want that love, if that's their main reason for being with somebody, then, I recommend that they don't get married.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like when you get clients who write to you and say, I'm married, but we're going through a difficult time, or I just don't see the point, or I just don't know how to relate to my spouse. And you see maybe that difficult Venus in the Navamsa in bad dignity, and they were able to get married because maybe their 7th and 9th lord was well supported, or their AtmaKaraka was well supported, but they've got this Venus, which is like a weak link in the chain.
Yeah.
And when I see that, that's sometimes the hardest people to consult, because essentially they have to learn to find purpose in their marriage. They have to learn to find comfort within themselves.
Yes.
And when you've got that negative impacted Venus, that's not what you want. You want someone to come along and say, hey, I know you're hungry, so I'm going to cook you a 7-course meal, versus you getting up and saying, I should go look in the fridge and see what I can make for myself,
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like when you work with someone and they ask about marriage, and they're married and they've been married for years, let's say, or they're on their 2nd marriage and they just don't feel they found the right person because of that Venus. What kind of things do you say to them just to bring more awareness to them that it's not, it might not be the other person.
That's what I tell them. First of all, I say, well, okay, especially if they have their partner's data, I look at the compatibility. It's basically fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. And I tell them it doesn't matter who you would be with. You would still have this feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to do something about that is to go to the divine, cultivate a relationship with God, however you understand it, spirit, because that's the source of all love. Relationships on earth are just a poor reflection or shadow of the love that we can have in our relationship with the divine. And it all comes from there. So you go to source.
Right.
The other thing too is if they have the data for their marriage, I'll do a chart for their wedding. And I did this recently for a client who is in a marriage and they're having trouble. They've already split up once. They got back together. They have a couple kids. And I did their marriage chart, and Saturn has been transiting over Venus in their marriage chart.
Right.
So, and that's when the trouble really began. They actually separated when Saturn started going over Venus. And so I was able to tell her, well, it just means that it's time for you guys to maybe renegotiate your contract.
Right.
And if there are any imbalances between you, to negotiate that and work it out.
Right.
And realize that, and interestingly enough too, the husband was feeling a strong need to like go back to church, to try to cultivate, his relationship with the religion of his childhood.
Right.
And we talked about that. And so they started going back to church, and she said they had a wonderful weekend because of it. So anyway, that's what I say.
Right.
Or I tell them, or marriage counseling if it's, if they're not at all inclined in that direction.
Right. Okay. So what we're going to see here, just to summarize and kind of tie all this together for our little talk here on Venus, is that mainly when we're looking at Venus in a person's chart, what we're assessing is their capacity to feel comforted in marriage, their capacity to make choices that lead to higher fulfillment in marriage and long-term committed relationships, their capacity for devotion, to be devoted to each other, and that essentially how that Venus is influenced is going to tell us how all those things are going to play out for the individuals. And the more we know about Venus, the more aware we will be to, to deal with it in a more conscious fashion, correct?
Right, exactly. It shows how much pleasure you're capable of feeling, how much you're capable of receiving, and whether or not you can see love when it's being given to you, because that's not always an easy thing to do. But the good thing about Venus is that it does respond to attention. And there are things that you can do. It basically represents the feminine aspect of everybody, men and women. And sometimes when a man's Venus is really trashed, I know that he's going to have a lot of unhappiness in love. And I tell him he just has a lot to learn, but he can learn it faster if he devotes himself to making a study of relationship, going to other men who've done that, learn from them, and then realize that Venus is actually his own internal feminine. That's who he's looking for. He's looking for her. And it's usually the way it goes is when men are young, they only experience their feminine through a woman. Otherwise, they don't know how to access it yet, unless they're spiritually oriented. Those are not the normal, usual guys, right? Like guys who are astrologers, for instance, right? You have much more access to your anima, and you always have. But as men get older, they do become more able to have access to their own inner feminine. And if they're having a lot of problems in their relationships, if they just keep getting crazy women or women who want to use them or abuse them, I mean, I've seen this. It's really heartbreaking. Again, it's the same answer. Cultivate a relationship with the divine, however you understand it, because in relationship to the divine, we're all female. And if you can learn how to receive from God, then you're going to be able to experience it with humans.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, some final thoughts on that, and you can add a little bit here if you feel that you want to. My thought is, when it comes to Venus, that if you want to work Venus well, and you've got some difficulty with Venus in your chart, if you're a man, find out what kind of flowers the woman in your life likes and buy her flowers.
This is true.
maybe clean up the house a little bit every now and then. Do some cleaning. Tell her you love her. Essentially allow her to feel like a woman. Maybe give her a massage every now and then, or buy her a massage if you're no good at it. And from the lady's perspective, and you can add some to this too, I would say, even if you think your husband or your spouse or your partner doesn't know what he's talking about, every now and then act like you think he knows what he's talking about.
Just pretend if you have to.
Just pretend if you have to, because remember, Venus is part of diplomacy, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes your mate or spouse might say or do something that you think to yourself, wow, I cannot believe, is this person a 3-year-old? Just roll with it a little bit. The thing that really kills relationships often, and that's usually when there's lack of diplomacy from Venus, is not giving some kind of gentle nurturing and encouragement and that capacity to be more diplomatic. So, in closing with Venus, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of things that you can do to help your Venus. You could get a pet and learn how to take really good care of that pet and appreciate it, because the pet will help you to get into your heart. Mm-hmm. You can do yoga and concentrate on the chest opening, heart chakra poses. Get regular massage. Mm-hmm. You can help young women on Fridays. Like you can, if you're a man, you probably can't volunteer at a shelter. No. But you can donate money. Right. I actually have a client who does that. He donates money regularly to a women's shelter. Buying flowers. You can, one of the things that you can do when you come to an astrologer is you can, there's a technique called AtmaKaraka. And in AtmaKaraka, it'll tell you like what signs is Venus the strongest in, what direction, and then in your bedroom, in whatever that direction is, you can put like a little altar to Venus. You can paint it the colors that would be the best for you. You can do things to your bedroom because that's the Venus room. And let me see. Luxury. Give yourself luxury. Like there's all kinds of little luxuries that just make life nicer, because that's all Venus stuff. Make sure that you have beauty around you.
Or learn to write poetry.
Yeah, write poetry. I mean, or read it. You can memorize poems. That's really great. Mm-hmm. And just find something to be devoted to. Your astrologer will tell you wherever Venus is in your chart and the sign that it's in, the house that it's in, the aspects to it, that'll give you a clue as to what you can be devoted to. Right. And you probably already are devoted to something. As most of us have things that we're interested in, or hobbies or whatever. Yeah. And usually Venus is involved in that. Oh, and vehicles.
Take care of your vehicles.
Take care of your vehicles, seriously. Yeah. And get the nicest one you can afford, the one that really works well, and then love it. Take care of it. Those will all help Venus, for sure.
All right. Well, great. Well, good. Well, we've covered some good ground here today, talking about Venus in general and relationships, and also ways to develop one's Venus. So I just want to thank you again for being with us, Karen. And our next video for the following week will be on Saturn, correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and conclude here. So Karen's website's divinetimeastrology.com. Go check it out and get a session with her.
That's right. There'll be links down at the bottom too.
That's right.
Or like if you want to listen to some of the podcasts we've done together, listen to that free download.
Right.
About Mars.
About Mars.
The course that we did together, about the AtmaKaraka, right?
And the soul planet.
The role it plays in relationship, yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay, great. So we'll move on with Saturn next. Okay. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah. Thank you.